All right, happy Friday, everyone. We're going to start this training on member enrollment and national service criminal history checks, fondly known as NSCHC. So I will pause as I go along in different parts to make sure that there aren't any questions that we can answer at that point, and then there'll also be time at the very end for any overall questions that you'll have. So let's get started. So a few things to know about requirements for all member enrollments. So the notice of grant award, or the NOGA, must be received first. That will come into us at Serve Colorado. We will tell you when that has come in, and that will let you know that you should be soon able to start enrolling your members. The program member enrollment period also has to start. This is the start and end dates of your state contract. So as soon as you have your state contract in hand, that's when you can start your member enrollment in the system. There's a couple caveats to that we'll go over, so don't worry if that feels like it might be a really short turnaround. Service locations need to be set up in eGrants. Service locations is the term for host sites, so in case that language is confusing. Slots of the correct type are available for all the applicants that you're enrolling, so just double check your slot table in eGrants for that. Your citizenship and Ssn has been verified. The NSCHC has been completed for all applicants age 18 and over. Everyone has been deemed eligible to serve, and they have completed their portion of the enrollment form in eGrants, which may include acknowledging a partial education award for those members that are towards the end of the max for their service. If all of this is very new to you, don't worry, we're going to go over it in stages, and you'll hear these things again over the next grouping of slides. So a quick overview of what the enrollment process looks like. So there are 4 major steps to this. The first is preparing for enrollment. The second is identifying your member and making sure you have all their information. The third is selecting that member and doing steps in eGrants to start enrollment. And then the fourth is the actual enrollment form and process in eGrants. We're going to break those down for you right now. So we'll go step by step and go into greater detail. So step 1, preparing for enrollment. So program staff have completed their required NSCHC training. This is the training that you do in Litmus. That walks you through the steps to conduct a criminal history check for Americorps. You've set up your service locations or host sites in eGrants. You have to get those set first before you can enroll members. And you've created your service opportunity listings in eGrants as well. Those are the equivalent of a condensed version of your position description. Just a quick note, eGrants is the system of record for all Americorps programs and must be accurate in terms of enrollment, member start date, and the primary service site of each member. If you have different questions like, hey, I've got a member that's going to be serving between 2 sites, not a problem. Your program officer can walk you through what that will look like in eGrants versus what their day-to-day may look like. So Egrants Access, be sure you have an eGrants account already set up. If you were the individual that submitted your application to us at Serve for the program, you should already have an eGrants account. If you are new staff or have new program staff coming on board, you will want to make sure that they have access to eGrants if they will be doing enrollment and exits of members. So to do that, you will go to the View My Americorps portal home button under that to get to mostly where we are going to be doing enrollment. So under that portal home side, you'll see all the different options on the left-hand side of the screenshot. The manage programs is where you will likely start, and this is to set up your service locations in eGrants. So when you go to manage programs, it will likely ask you for your service location info. If you scroll further down, it'll probably populate your program info first. And then if you click on service location info, it will then pull up this page. If there's nothing listed in there, then you'll click create and add in that information. It is typically the name of the organization and their address. All of your members have to be assigned to a location, so please be sure that these are accurate. When you hit create, this is the screen that will populate to enter in that service location information if it's not already listed on that screen. If you're a returning program, it may already be listed. If you'll just double check the addresses for us and make sure that they're current. Once you've entered all the information, go ahead and click save, and it should now populate in that list that we just saw. So service opportunity listings, again, you will spend most of your time in the portal home section of eGrants. So on that left side menu, it'll say recruitment work basket. Within your recruitment work basket, there are 3 tabs: pending applications, service opportunities, and VADs. VADs you will have nothing to do with. If you're familiar with Vista, that would be the tab for Vista programs. So you can ignore that one for now. Service opportunities is where you want to go. And if you don't currently have a service opportunity listed in here, you need to create a new one. Click on create an opportunity listing, and it will allow you to input the information from your position descriptions into that. So again, grantees are required to post all available member service opportunities in the My Americorps portal. eGrants is the back end of that portal. So where members see the My Americorps portal, the admin side of that portal is eGrants. So you'll hear them mentioned back and forth. It's essentially the same, two sides of the same coin, if you will. There are a number of resources for service opportunity listings. You can find them at the Americorps website. We also have a couple other ones in our external program drive that we will let you know how to access as well. And there may be other recruitment strategies available that you can use beyond the My Americorps platform. So some programs do applications outside of the My Americorps portal. You still have to input these service opportunity listings here. So just be aware that you have to do it in the eGrant system, regardless of if you have an external application that you're using. So if you have existing opportunity listings that are in here and you need to edit them, you can click on view edit and modify things. If you recently submitted one of these and you're like, oh shoot, I need to change something on it, double check with your program officer, because sometimes when you edit those, it's going to resubmit to Americorps and that may take a few days to be approved. So depending on what it is, it might be a simple adjustment that doesn't require that reapproval. So if you want to double check with one of your program officers, that might be a helpful step for you before doing that. Also, triple checking your work before you hit submit will also hopefully speed up that process. Okay, so before I go on to the next step, are there any questions about this part?
I think we had one question that Paul answered, unless Lindy, if you want to follow up. And somebody asked a question directly to me about generally getting the slides out. And yes, we will have the recording and a PDF of the slides.
Yep, there's a number of resources that go along with this training, particularly for criminal history checks when we get to that piece of it, that will all be posted and sent out today, this afternoon, hopefully. They're also posted on the external program drive, so you should have access to them throughout the year as well. Great, and thank you, Paul, for answering any quick questions that pop up in chat. Okay, step 2. So you need to identify your members. So an individual applies, excellent. Then the program needs to screen that applicant. You need to gather their information, complete their criminal history check, and then determine their eligibility from there. So let's dive a little deeper on that. So to receive applications, you'll set up your service opportunity listings, as we just went through, to allow folks to apply to your program. So in the portal, you'll see part of a screen that looks like this, and it'll ask, are you accepting applications now? Yes, most likely. You can put in dates in there for when you're accepting applications. I would make your application deadline beyond what you might want people to apply for, so that if for some reason you don't get all the spots that you need, you have a buffer window so you don't have to go back in and change that date. You also want to figure out if you're going to accept the Americorps application. So what that means is, will you allow applicants to apply through the My Americorps portal to your program, yes or no? If you are requiring your own application, then they want you to input the information as to how members can access that, or potential members can access that. So if you do not accept applications through My Americorps, then you have to develop your own process to do that. Some programs use Google Forms, others use maybe their HR system. It just depends on what your organization already has in place, or what may be required from your organization, depending on the size and complexities. Again, programs will be asked to provide details where folks can receive information to apply. If you also post your position descriptions on websites like Indeed, it's good to put the link in there to the portal if you want them to apply through the Americorps portal. Or if there's a different form that you want them to use, include all of that information there. So screening applicants. So all applicants have to be screened for eligibility and criminal history. Build in as much time as possible to complete the criminal history check and determine eligibility as you can. I would say the minimum is probably a week to 2 weeks, depending on the time of year and how many folks you need to get in and how flexible your start date is. Applicants have to have their eligibility verified before they can start service. And that is at least the day before they start service. So as you're gathering applicant information, you need to get the following information and make sure that it's consistent with Social Security Administration records. So their legal name. So my legal name is Jacqueline. I don't use it very often. I feel like I'm in trouble when people call me Jacqueline, but I can't put Jackie Rader on the form and have my background check run. It has to say Jacqueline Rader. So making sure that you have a legal name for someone, their social security number, their date of birth, and additional information could be their citizenship verification documents. So a birth certificate, passport, green card, and their contact info. Phone, email, and address are typically the most of what you will need. So if someone has a state ID or a driver's license, that's usually a good thing to grab to get their legal name, their date of birth, and sometimes part of their contact info. So member eligibility, the eligibility requirements are laid out for you in 45 CFR 2522.200. So you can look them up in more detail if you want, but here are the basics. So age, participants must be at least 17 years of age. For many of our programs, they must be 18. They have to have a high school diploma or equivalent, and they self-certify that they have that in their enrollment form in the My Americorps portal. They must be a citizen, a US citizen, national, or lawful permanent resident. Typically, that would be, if they have a passport, that's really easy to prove, a birth certificate from a US state or territory, or a green card if they are a lawful permanent resident. All of those should be valid. They should not be expired. And then they need to satisfy the National Service Criminal History Check eligibility criteria, which means they have to consent to the check. They cannot make a false statement in connection with the checks. They cannot be required to be listed on a state or national sex offender registry, and they cannot have been convicted of murder as defined in US code. Okay, National Service Criminal History Checks. Before I dig deeper into this, are there any questions about the first part with eligibility?
I haven't seen anything come in through chat at the moment.
Okay.
Hi, Jackie. This is
go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, I couldn't find the raise my hand button, but I do have a question. Can people with work permits or visas, work visas, serve on Americorps?
So there is possibly one Americorps program that would allow for potentially work authorization, but generally no. For Americorps state and national programs, they must be a U.S. citizen, national, or lawful permanent resident. They cannot just have a work authorization or work visa for the U.S.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on eligibility? Okay, so moving into national service criminal history checks, it's a mouthful, so we tend to say NSCHC. Here's the requirements. So individuals required to have a national service criminal history check are a state national member age 18 and over. So if you have participants who are 17, the day that they start their service, they are not required to have a criminal history check conducted on them. Any staff who receive a salary directly or reflected as match under a cost reimbursement grant. Individuals that do not require a criminal history check are fixed amount grant staff, anyone who is entirely included in the grant recipient's indirect cost rate, and individuals under the age of 18 on their first day of service. So conducting the NSCHC, all checks, there are 3 checks that comprise the NSCHC, all of them must be completed no later than the day before the individual's start date. So the NSOPW, the National Sex Offender Public Website check, a state of residence and or state of service check, and an FBI fingerprint check all have to be completed before the first day of service. And when we say completed, we'll get into this more, but completion means that the checks are run, they've been reviewed, they've been adjudicated, and the individual has been cleared to serve. So we use 2 vendors that are approved by Americorps. So one is Truescreen. So Truescreen, if you are a returning program, you will know that they just changed their platform and it looks a little different. So we'll be going over some of the new features on what that looks like. Truescreen is used for the NSOPW check and the state of residence check, if applicable, and we'll get into more what that means. And then to adjudicate the results and consider the results, you have to review the authorization form that the individual signs in the Truescreen system, and then review the results of their check and adjudicate those within the system as well. Keep in mind that with Truescreen and with Fieldprint, which is our FBI check vendor, you must use an Americorps specific account to be compliant. We have an entire how-to guide as to how you need to set up your account to do that we'll share with you as well. So for our brand new programs that are hearing about these systems for the first time, we have a step-by-step guide to help you figure out how to set up your accounts and then start this process. So Truescreen does have a waiver. It's pre-approved by Americorps. And essentially what it says is that grantees using Truescreen will not be required to get a check from an unavailable state or territory if they have obtained an NSOPW check from Truescreen, any required state checks that are available from Truescreen, and conducted a fingerprint-based FBI check. It does not apply to grant recipients who obtain criminal history checks from Truescreen through an account that's not established with the Americorps specific agreement code. So be sure if you already have an existing account with them that you're using the correct account to run your checks for your Americorps program. So using Fieldprint, again, Fieldprint is our FBI fingerprint vendor. They only run the FBI check. And for Colorado, Colorado is what is referred to as an NFF state or a national fingerprint file state, which means that our state background check results are sent to the FBI. And so when you run an FBI check, it automatically runs the state for info for Colorado. So essentially, for all intents and purposes, if the individual lives in the state of Colorado, they're serving in the state of Colorado, then you don't need to run a specific state check in Truescreen for that individual. You can run an FBI check and the NSOPW check through Truescreen and be covered. So we'll go into that a little bit more if there's additional questions, but just as a heads up. So again, to adjudicate results in FieldPrint, you'll review them in the module. You'll select pass or fail in the other module. You'll adjudicate the results in FieldPrint. So FieldPrint is now up to date and everything can be done electronically, much like it is done in Truescreen. And then you'll need to double check that you have all the information on the page and retain a copy of that in your files if you want. FieldPrint and Truescreen will both retain the check results and the adjudication in their system for 7 years. If you feel that you need to retain a copy of this information for longer than that, you may download it and keep it securely in a separate file. Please note that you may not use FieldPrint to conduct FBI checks on individuals that are not required to comply with criminal history checks because they are not authorized by law. So if you are not required to have an NSCHC conducted, you cannot use FieldPrint to run a check. So here's what the results and adjudication pages look like in FieldPrint. So on the left is the My Fitness Determination module. This is what will pop up to show you if an individual is cleared or not cleared. FieldPrint does not give you rap sheets. Truescreen will provide a rap sheet if it is available for the individual. FieldPrint does not. Instead, they tell you if the individual has been cleared or not cleared. And those are based off of if the individual has been convicted of murder. So if the individual has not been convicted of murder, it will show as cleared. If they have, it will show as not cleared. Or it could be that there is missing information, in which case you may need to do some more research to figure out if the individual would be cleared for the program. And then in the activity box towards the bottom on the left-hand side of your screen, it'll tell you the actual steps that are taken. So when the order went in, what time the appointment was for fingerprinting, when the results came back. And then at the very bottom, it will eventually tell you who actually went in and adjudicated the results for the program. In the My Fingerprints module, which is the screen on your screenshot on your right, this is where you'll say pass or fail, and then it will also populate under where it says email receipt. You choose pass or fail from a dropdown, and then it will input, typically automatically, it'll put in the dates of who looked at it and who made that change. If it doesn't, you can type it in. And if for whatever reason the applicant challenges the results, then you would input that information as well. As I mentioned, Colorado is a national fingerprint file state, and there is a waiver for folks that are an NFF state. So essentially what it means is that if a required state check is from a state that participates in the NFF, like Colorado, a separate state check is not needed. If a required state check is from a state that does not participate in the NFF, then a state check does need to be run via Truescreen. Now, to make it more confusing, if this state does not send information into Truescreen, there are a couple of them. I want to say California and Arizona are good examples of that. Then you don't need to run the state of residence check for those states either. They fall under a waiver for Truescreen. So there's a couple tools that will help you out with that to provide more information and make it a little easier to understand which checks you would need to run. Okay, break-in service. So if you are a brand new program, break-in service will likely not apply to you. If you are an existing program and you have members that are going to serve a second term, if the gap between their end date from their first term and the start date of their second term is less than 180 days, you do not need to rerun their criminal history check, provided their original check is compliant. So it can't hurt to double check that and make sure that all of those checks contain all three parts to be compliant. So members under age 18, if a member starts their first term and they are under 18, so probably 17 at the time, they are not required to have a criminal history check conducted. However, If they serve a second term, they are required to have a criminal history check conducted. So if they're serving consecutive terms with your organization and they have turned 18 at some point during their first term, they now have to have that check conducted for them. The 180 days does not apply. So are there any questions so far on the criminal history check information?
Still nothing coming through on chat.
Okay, great. Okay, so Surf Colorado requirements. So we as a commission have a few requirements, and these are to help you navigate the intricacies of criminal history checks. They are somewhat time consuming and they need to be done correctly. So a couple things that we have in place. So just as a reminder, Truescreen is the NSOPW and state checks. FieldPrint is the FBI check. And so to help organize how those go, we created a verification form. The verification form needs to be completed for every individual that you run a check on. That shouldn't be staff and members. So essentially what it does is it walks you through all the different pieces for each check in Truescreen and FieldPrint. And then at the very bottom has you determine the eligibility of that individual to serve in your program. It tracks all that information for you. So you have like a quick reference that says, okay, here's the dates that we ran everything. We made the determination on this date. Great, we're good to go. The other piece to that is a master tracker. It is a spreadsheet template, and it's your quick sheet to look at for all of your staff, all of your members. If you have 10 members, it's probably not the end of the world. Some of our programs have upwards of 400 members, and that master tracker is a lot easier to look at and scroll down and say, okay, yes, all these people have the correct dates, they're good to go, and go from there. That is the purpose of that. You are able to manipulate the master tracker to what you need it to be. There's a couple programs that have expanded it, so they include all of their enrollment requirements in one master spreadsheet. That's totally fine as long as there's a separate tab that we can see all of their criminal history check information in one swoop for monitoring. The other fun thing with the verification form is the date that you determine eligibility at the very bottom of that form should be the date you use to certify the NSCHC was completed in the enrollment screen in eGrants. So that will also make it a little bit easier for you. So what documentation do you need to have for criminal history checks that you need to retain? So you need to have consent to conduct the checks to start with. The state and FBI checks and that information is tracked in Truescreen and FieldPrint. So each applicant, before they run their fingerprint check and before you can run their check in Truescreen as a name-based check, there is a consent form that they call an authorization that does work for that. You are welcome to do an outside form for your program if you so choose. The notice that selection for work or service is contingent upon the program's review of the criminal history results. That is a piece in those authorizations in each system. Again, you can also have an outside form if you want. The verification form that we just went over, it includes the consideration of results and the program determination of eligibility. So it's very important that you have that form for every individual. And then again, FieldPrint and Truescreen results are both housed for 7 years in their systems, but you can download those if you want to. There are a lot of resources for criminal history checks. The Americorps website has a whole bunch. They include the required e-course training via Litmus that needs to be completed annually. It is a best practice to have 2 individuals from your organization take that training. If you can take them on separate days, that will give you some overlap a little bit. But it also means that if someone is out, then someone else knows how to run the checks. The Using FieldPrint and Truescreen manual walks you through setting up your accounts, what the costs are, how to run the checks, what is required by Americorps The NSCHC manual now includes the enforcement guidance. So hopefully there are no compliance issues, but the enforcement guidance talks about what that would look like if there is a compliance issue, and walks you through the entire process there. These are good things to review if you haven't ever looked at them, or if you have read them in whole. They were updated in January of this year, so it would be great for you to go back through and make sure that you know what the current guidance is. There's also a fun, what they call a TAT, or turnaround time document that gives the pricing for Truescreen and field print, in addition to how long it takes them to get you a check back. So those are good to take a quick look at and see how much time you should be able to build in for folks to run their background checks in order for them to start at the time that you want them to. The Surf Colorado Google Drive NSCHC folder, which is the external program folder. There are required forms in there. So the most current master tracker template, the verification form. There's a resource list, including links to many of the above on the Americorps website. And then there's also a how-to guide, which will walk you through all of this as well. The manuals that Americorps provides are written for all streams of Americorps service and can sometimes be a little bit confusing. So the purpose of the guide is to simplify it for what our programs need to do to run compliant criminal history checks. So you can take both of those together and see what works best for you. But the purpose is to simplify it a little bit so that you don't get caught in some of the Americorps jargon. The NSCHC waiver, there is a waiver option. There are a couple different options. So Surf Colorado has a waiver option. We require all of our programs to use Truescreen and field print to run their checks. However, we understand that sometimes in rural areas specifically, that there are some significant challenges to getting fingerprint checks done at field print sites. I feel like a number of our programs in Southwest Colorado send their folks to New Mexico because that's the closest site for them at the time. But there are other options for that. So if it feels like it's going to be a specific challenge for your program or some of your members to utilize field print more specifically for fingerprint checks, please talk to your program officer for what your options are. There also is potentially an option to waive pieces of the check depending on very specific circumstances that we as the commission have to request on your behalf from Americorps. So again, if you're having a specific issue with running criminal history checks for some of your members, please have a conversation with your program officer so we can give you what your options may be for that specific issue. All right, I think this is the end of criminal history checks for the moment. Are there any questions that are about this process?
We did have one come in through chat, and it might need a little more information, Jackie. I'll read it verbatim. Is there a maximum time for NSCHC check before the start of service? I'm not quite sure I get it, but maybe you do.
Yeah, so if you're referring to like how early you can run a check before someone starts service, there's not a prescribed time. However, keep in mind that the earliest that you run checks, so if you're running a check 6 months in advance, which is I think roughly 180 days, that a lot can change, right? So especially if you don't know the individual that well, they weren't your program previously, a lot can change, and it could be that something does hit their record that you're not aware of within that time frame. So figure out what makes the most sense for your program. Again, I feel like most programs run them a couple weeks in advance, some maybe a month in advance, but not generally not much more than that. But you can just keep in mind that whatever time it is, that's an opportunity for folks to have other things pop up on their record. Any other questions on criminal history checks? All right. We're going to move on to step 3. So member selection. So you need to select your applicant in eGrants. There are two ways to do that. So we'll look at those two ways. The applicant will then need to complete their enrollment form in their My Americorps portal. And then the Social Security Administration will start their checks for citizenship. So the two options for selecting your applicants. So option one is selecting applicants via the My Americorps application. So this is where your service opportunity listings that you input into eGrants. The applicant said, yes, you can submit a My Americorps application. They will then come back into eGrants as pending applicants in the recruitment work basket. Once you've looked through all of the tabs for that individual, so across the top here, they have to submit basic information, a motivational statement, their skills and experience, education level, any community service background that they have, a criminal history questionnaire, demographic info, and then they are meant to submit two, I believe it's 2 references. Then the last tab is selection. So once you've reviewed all of that information, you'll go to selection. And under overall recommendation, you will select, yes, they're selected for service. No, they were rejected for service. If they're rejected for service, it doesn't mean that they are rejected from doing Americorps. It just means that they may not be a good fit for your program. If you do accept applicants via the My Americorps portal, please make a decision on these as soon as you can, because if you're not going to select an individual, they only have so many applications they can put out at a time. And sometimes they max those out. And if you don't make a determination, then that is one less spot that they could potentially apply for a different program. So if you'll help them out and make that decision. Once you've selected your recommendation, you'll certify, reading all the information here, you'll certify that they're good to go or that you've rejected them, etc. And then you'll hit submit. And then applicant will be notified via email of your recommendation. The other option you have is an outside application. Again, that could be a Google form. It could be using your HR system. It could be anything. Sometimes I think it's just an email packet of information to a specific individual at your organization, however you want to do it. If you do an outside application, you then have to invite the individual that you want to join your program into eGrants. So what that means is that you'll have to go to invite members, and it's going to ask you just to enter a whole bunch of information. So their legal name, their social security number, their date of birth, their email address, and then you need to select the correct program year for your program and the program title. There may likely be only one for your program. It depends. Some might have more than one. I want to say national directs typically have more than one. You might only have one. And then the service location, if you know that already, if you don't, it's not required. Once you've input all of that information, then you can continue to add additional folks, or you can just hit save. And then it will send an invitation to the applicant via email. Couple things to note. If you have an individual who is currently serving with another program and their term will be ending right before your program starts, they must first be exited from their current program before you can enroll them. Now, programs have 30 days to exit members. So if your program is meant to start within that 30-day exit window, then it may be a continuing conversation with the applicant to ensure that they let their current program know, hey, I need to be exited sooner than 30 days because I'm starting a new program. The system will not allow you to enroll someone who is still listed as currently in another program. And the date of birth and social security number must be entered correctly to avoid delays in enrollment. If you enter or transpose numbers and they don't match, it will take forever to get the individual enrolled. So please triple check your work before you hit save or submit in these windows and make sure that all the information is correct. So if you're inviting applicants, this is what they will get. They will receive an email that tells them what their next steps need to be. So there's a link in the email. It will connect them to the My Americorps portal. If they don't currently have an account, they will have to set one up. It will then make sure that their identity is verified. Please let applicants know that the site is secure and the information entered must be accurate and reflect what is on a government issued ID for them. So hyphens, spaces, multiple middle or last names, et cetera, all need to be accounted for. If you resend the link or delete the invitation, the link will be broken. So make sure that they know that this is coming, what it says. It'll likely come from My Americorps at americorps.gov. Make sure that that doesn't end up in their spam folders, et cetera, and what the next steps need to be. So in the member enrollment form, per the grant terms and conditions, the enrollment form has to be completed by the applicant, and individuals who have previously served, again, must be exited from their program in order for you to enroll them. So 2 things to keep in mind. Here's what the enrollment form looks like. It's one very long page that's side by side here for you. The member will fill this out. It has their address, contact information, some demographic information, their citizenship status, any other information that Americorps collects in here, how they heard about the program, the desired name that they want to go by, since they have to use their legal name for enrollment, and they will set their passwords at this point too. Once they have completed this form, they will hit save information at the bottom. Once they do that, the eligibility verification process is initiated. So what that means is their social security number and citizenship has to be verified. Once they hit save on the enrollment form, the process to verify their Ssn and citizenship starts. It is done by the Social Security Administration, and it is done automatically most of the time. So once they hit submit, it goes to the SSA. They start that verification process. If the individual's information is verified, typically it's within 3 business days, their information in eGrants will show up with verified next to their SSN and citizenship. If there's an issue, it will say returned. And then there are additional steps that you have to take. So for example, at the bottom here, if they're verified, it'll show up as SSN status, verified, and the date. Citizenship status, verified, and the date. If there's a part of that or both parts of that that are unable to be verified, it will show returned. Both the SSN and citizenship status must be noted as verified or manually verified, which we'll talk about in a moment, in the My Americorps portal and in eGrants before the individual can be enrolled. eGrants will not notify you if this is an issue necessarily, so you'll need to just double check on these as you're doing enrollment for folks. So manual verification. So the individual's SSN and citizenship are not verified. They came back returned. Now what do you have to do? You may receive an email notification that says that their status is returned and that additional documentation needs to be submitted to manually verify them. So now what you need to do is request a secure file link from the National Service Hotline, or what we commonly refer to as the help desk. They will send you that link, usually within 24 hours. You will submit the requested documents. So if their citizenship needs to be verified, it is likely a request for a birth certificate or other document that shows their citizenship. Could be a passport. If someone changed their name recently, they may require additional information because it may not be aligning with the federal records that the Social Security Administration has, et cetera. There's a number of ways that they may be returned. Once the documents are submitted, the help desk will forward it to the National Service Trust. If the information provided to the trust is sufficient, the member record in eGrants will be updated to manually verified, typically within 3 business days. Once the member's SSN and citizenship are manually verified, you can continue the enrollment process. Keep in mind that for some individuals, this process may take several days to a couple of weeks to complete, depending on how quickly you can track down that information and submit it, and whatever else might be happening with the Social Security Administration or the National Trust. So factor that into your planning period for enrollment. So steps to request a secure file link. So some best practices for that on the left here is the form that you would typically fill out for the help desk. You can also call them, but they will typically then send you back an email that says, hey, please submit all the rest of this information that we're looking for. So sometimes it is better to just go to their website and complete the form. It also gives you a written record of what you are doing for that specific issue. So a couple things to keep in mind. In your request, indicate that you are a state and national program enrolling applicants, and you need a secure file link to submit verification documentation. You might also want to keep in mind the number of files you may need to submit. If it's a lot of files, you may want to let them know. If your program has multiple individual cases requiring verification at the same time, send them all together. Document all communication and take screenshots if necessary, and then continue to follow up with the help desk regularly and inform them if the start date for those individuals is approaching. And then keep your program officer informed so we can help you if any challenges arise. Sometimes things get bogged down at the help desk and we may be able to fast track them if needed. So please let us know if you're having any issues with this process. So pending verification to verified, again, if submitted documentation is sufficient, the member status will change from pending to manually verified, or potentially return to manually verified, depending on what the case is. It should occur within 3 business days, and the program will not receive notification of that change. So where you might get an email saying, hey, we need more information to verify this individual, you will not be notified if they are verified. So you will need to regularly check the member record to make sure that when that has happened, and then so you can continue enrollment. Some members may require multiple rounds of verification, which can delay the enrollment process. So sometimes it'll say their SSN and citizenship need to be manually verified. If you only submit information for one and not the other at the same time, it just delays the process. So be sure that you read carefully what they're asking for additional documentation and submit all of that at the same time to speed up the process. So members may not start serving until both are verified and the criminal history check is complete. Are there any questions on this part of enrollment?
I haven't seen anything come through chat. Don't forget you can unmute yourselves, or if you can access your reactions tab, you can use the raise your hand button.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go on to step 4. So this is the final step in the process, so member enrollment. So verification of eligibility has gone through. We'll look at, there's 2 different ways that you can enroll folks in eGrants: individual enrollment and group enrollment. I feel like most of our programs do individual enrollment, but there is a group enrollment potential depending on if your program is eligible. And then if you have any folks that are doing their 2nd, 3rd, possibly 4th term and would only receive a partial education award or no education award, but still want to serve, they have to acknowledge that in the enrollment process. So let's dive a little deeper. Confirming SSN and citizenship verification. So just to continue a little bit, once everything is verified, then you can go on to the next step. There's a list of verification status types here for you just as a reference. So if it's open, then the individual has been invited to participate, but they haven't created their profile yet in the portal. If it's pending, then they're waiting for results to come back. Verified means that they're good to go and they've been automatically verified by the SSA. Return means additional documentation needs to be submitted. Manually verified means that that documentation went through and was able to verify the individual. And then cannot be verified means that they may not be eligible based on their social security number and citizenship. You can appeal that decision within 30 days of that cannot be verified notification. I have not seen that come up before, but there is an option for that as well. So completing the member enrollment form. So this is a quick snapshot of what the form looks like. You will confirm their SSN and citizenship are in verified or manually verified status on the top. Then you will, if the applicant is 18 or older, you'll enter the date that the criminal history check was completed and adjudicated, which means you'll go back to your Nschc verification form, and the very bottom where you determined eligibility for the individual, the date that that form was signed and that eligibility determination was made, you will enter that date into the Nschc certification box. You will then complete the placement information. So their start date, it must be on or after their SSN and citizenship verification dates and after the criminal history check certification date. Their program year, program title, their service location, if you know it at the time, but it's not required, and then the slot type that you're enrolling them in. You will then check the box to certify that everything above is correct. And then once all of that is done and all your dates align, the very bottom, where it says enroll member, that button should become bold and you should be able to click that to enroll the member. You can also save information in the enrollment field. So if you hit save instead of enroll member, it'll tell you, it'll give you a little note that says the information has been saved successfully. To complete the enrollment, you have to choose from the pending enrollment basket. And the only things it will not keep for you is it will not keep your start date that the individual is supposed to start and the slot type. So you will need to add those in before you can click enroll once you go back into it. Partial award acknowledgement. So if you have anyone that will exceed the amount of 2 full-time education awards while serving in your program, they have to acknowledge that they will receive a partial or no education award for that term of service. So if you attempt to click enroll and they have to acknowledge partial award, it will populate and tell you an email notification was sent to the member to acknowledge partial award. It will then show up on your screen as pending partial award acknowledgement. If it says that enrollment is not complete, the member cannot start service yet. The email notification that they will get is again from my Americorps at americorps.gov. It will say that they have to acknowledge a partial education award. They need to know that they need to look for this email so that it doesn't get stuck in their spam, etc. They need to complete and acknowledge this as soon as possible. And if they delay in completing this process, it will delay their enrollment overall. So for the applicant's view or the member's view of this, they'll log into their My Americorps portal, click on the enrollment form, which is in the menu on the left. Then they will scroll down to the very bottom of the enrollment form. And there's a box that says partial award acknowledgement. They will need to check, I accept, I wish to enroll in a term of service and understand that upon successful completion of this term, I will receive a partial education award. They will then click save information. Once they do that, it should come back into eGrants for that member and it'll say partial award acknowledged. Once you see that, you can now go back into the member's enrollment form and the enroll member button should populate for you to enroll that member. Okay, any questions on this part of it? Nope. Okay, moving on. So check your work. Through the entire process, it pays to check and double check your work. There are a couple of things that you can run at the very end of the process to make sure that you got everyone. You can run reports and eGrants. You can pull up the member roster, I think there's a member enrollment form that lists everyone as well. View each member individually, their service information in eGrants. You can pull up their member record and double check all the information there. Then double check that they were enrolled within the 8-day member enrollment period. So for enrollment, from the start date that the member is supposed to start, you have 8 days, not business days, 8 calendar days to enroll the individual. You need to make sure you have sufficient slots available, that their citizenship and Ssn are verified, that their criminal history check process was completed and certified, their service location was selected, and that their start date is no later than the date that you're looking at. And are they eligible to serve? They have not previously served more than 4 terms. They have not declined a partial education award. They have not received an unsatisfactory performance rating from a previous term of service, and they're not currently actively enrolled in the same program or in another term that, when combined, exceeds full-time service. So running reports to check enrollments. The enrollment approval cycle time report. To get to these, again, you're in Portal Home. And on the menu on the left, you'll go down to Ssn reports, Ssn state and national reports. You'll select the report that you want. So the 2 that are helpful for checking enrollments are enrollment approval cycle time. It should show you all expected enrolled members and the number of days from the member's start date to enrollment. So if you scroll down that form, you should see numbers that say 8 or less. If it's over 8, then there's an issue and we should take a closer look as to why that is. It does happen periodically, but hopefully it does not for your program. And then the member download report that will allow you to check the member service location, slot type, status, start date, etc. You can also check the Ssn and Citizenship Report. I know Paul runs these on a regular basis so that we have an idea of if any programs have folks that are pending citizenship or having any issues with that. But this is also a great thing to check as you're doing enrollments. It will tell you the trust enrolled status and their citizenship status and Ssn status. So if you run this for your program, it'll tell you if folks are pending, if they're manually verified, if they're returned, if they're not able to be verified, etc. So what happens if the enroll button in the enrollment form isn't active? This does happen periodically. There are some things you can do to double check. So check that the applicant's social security number and citizenship verification status say verified or manually verified. Verify that the dates are on or before the entered start date. If they are not, then you need to correct the start date. Check their criminal history check certification date. That date entered has to be before the entered start date. If it is not, then you need to fix the start date. Check the entered start date. Make sure that the date is within the member enrollment period, otherwise known as within your grant start and end dates. That the date is no later than today's date. So it could be prior to today's date, but it shouldn't be tomorrow's date necessarily. That the date is no earlier than the verification dates for citizenship and Ssn, and same for criminal history checks. And that all fields are completed. So sometimes when you save the form and you go back in and you're like, oh, I can go and enroll now. So you go and click the enrolled member button and it won't activate. And you're like, why is that? Double check that you put in their start date and their slot type again, because if you save the form, it's not going to save that information for you. So make sure all the fields are completed. If all the previously mentioned steps are complete and you still cannot enroll the applicant, contact the help desk and your program officer. Please let us know that that is an issue for you so that we can walk you through any alternative steps and or keep a close eye on what the help desk can do to help you out. That is all I have for this training. There are 4 program officers with Serve Colorado, myself, Tara Lynn, Zach, and Patricia. You should be assigned to one of us. If you don't know who your person is just yet, you should know very soon. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us or to Paul, and we can direct you to the correct person or help out if someone is out of town, out of the office, etc. So, any questions on this training at all?
And as a reminder, the materials and the recording will be with you soon. So I know some people need to go back through some content and then they'll have more questions, and that's perfectly fine. Our team is available after this as well. If something didn't come up for you now, that's perfectly fine.
If you get into the enrollment field in the form one day and you're like, I don't remember how to do this, and the slides and all the other resources are not helping you out, please let us know. We can walk you through what that process looks like as you're doing it in real time if needed. So just don't wait to ask a question. Please let us know how we can help you.